Hey there, guys, how's it going? Now, guys, I'm really pissed off right now. I really am pissed off. And the reason I'm pissed off is because yesterday, against my better judgment, I decided to record my top 10 worst movies of 2019. Now, I know it was a little bit early, I was supposed to wait until the last week of the year. However, for whatever reason, I was in the mood to do the video yesterday, so I just went ahead and did it. Completely forgetting that today I was due to go to the cinema. We were going to the cinema today to see whatever was on. And ironically, we just saw the worst movie, and I'm not exaggerating here, guys. I'm not trying to be hyperbole. I'm not trying to be funny or anything like that. I'm not trying to make a point. We just saw the worst movie that has ever been made, and definitely the worst movie of 2019. So sadly, I'm going to have to redo that fucking list. I'm going to have to start the whole bloody thing again, because I can't be bothered editing here and there and whatnot. I'm just going to do the whole thing again. This movie has put me in a real bad mood because it's made me have to redo all that work that I just did yesterday. And man, this movie was so bad that where do I even begin? Let me just put out to you, like, just to put it into perspective how bad this movie is. There were multiple people in the theater I was in, because the movie just came out today here. Multiple people walked out. I'm not even kidding. I sat through the whole thing because, you know, if I go to see a film, even if it's bad, I generally do sit through it. You know, very rarely do I walk out, but I wanted to walk out. If I was there myself, which I wasn't, I was with someone else, but if I was there myself, I probably would have walked out. This movie, I'm not even kidding, people behind me were muttering, saying how bad the film was and how it didn't make sense. Multiple people walked out before even the halfway point. This movie it's so bad to the point where I'm actually flabbergasted that this movie got made. I'm actually like, you would think with all the shit movies I've seen this year and with all the crap that has come out from Hollywood in recent years, you would think that nothing would surprise me. It continues to surprise me. And I'm no longer going to say that things are not going to get not going to get worse, because sadly they just get worse and worse every generation. Every year movies get worse and worse. They get more and more pretentious. So let me stop rambling and let me just get into the meat of how bad this film is. So this film, right, it's supposed to be a horror film, okay? It's a Blumhouse film. It's called Black Christmas. It's a remake of a remake. I have actually seen the previous Black Christmas remake, and it was just a terrible slasher film. I didn't like that film at all. I've never actually seen the original. I know a lot of people like the original. Maybe I'll watch it one day, but I've never seen it, as of now, so I can't really comment on it. So this is a remake of a remake. So it's bad enough that we've had a bunch of shitty remakes and reboots this year. Now we're getting remakes of remakes, which is even worse. It's supposed to be a horror film, okay? Like I said, it's called Black Christmas. The previous two Black Christmas movies were horror films, right? It's a Blumhouse movie. They only make horror films. What else was I supposed to think going into this movie? It was advertised and marketed as a horror film, okay? Can we at least agree on that? I'm going to ask you guys, what makes a good horror film? What are the tropes or the attributes that you would attribute to a good horror film? I would argue that a good horror film, a horror film that is self-aware, that knows what it is, relies on a multitude of attributes. First of all, suspense. Alright, it has to be suspenseful. Okay, it has to provoke that type of emotion in you. It has to be character driven. That's the thing about horror films that I think are just as important as any other genre. You have to relate to the characters, or you have to empathize with the characters, or you have to straight up really dislike the characters so much to the point where you want bad things to happen to them. I mean, that's the opposite end of that spectrum. I mean, how many slasher films have we seen over the years where you hate the characters so much that you just want to see them get butchered, and then by the time it happens you're cheering? Or like the opposite end of that spectrum, you empathize with the character. You understand this character's backstory and motivations, and you understand how vulnerable this character is, and you just want them to make it out of it alive. This movie doesn't seem to understand any of that. Okay, good horror movies also have to have good cinematography and camera work. Okay, it's very important. I would say more so than other movies. Horror movies have to get the cinematography right, right? They have to get the, the camera angles and stuff like that have to work in order to build tension. Sound design is very important in a horror film. It has to sound legit. What I would also argue, and I guess some people would disagree because this is a PG-13 horror film, which I can't stand. I mean, why would a horror film be PG-13? That doesn't make any sense to me. But this is one of those PG-13 horror films which I don't like. And it brings me to my next point. The next attributes that horror movies need to have, in my opinion, practical effects. Okay, horror movies, more so than any other genre, have to have realistic practical effects. Okay, all the great classic horror films had them. Okay, all of them had real set pieces, real gore, real practical effects that looked real. There has to be an element of realism, because when you have to suspend your disbelief so much when a movie is PG-13, it isn't legit. Therefore there's no tension. All right, this idea of building tension and building an atmosphere doesn't work in a PG-13 film. It just doesn't. Alright, it has to have realistic, practical effects. If you're going to have action in a horror film, and it isn't necessary to have action in a horror film, but if you're going to have it, and this film does, it has to be filmed properly. There has to be stunt work, okay? There has to be some proper choreography. This movie, right, takes all of those attributes that I just mentioned, proper attributes which make a good horror movie. It throws them all in the trash, right, throws them all out the window, and instead decides to hold your hand from scene 1 all the way through to the final scene of the movie, right, and it's a very short movie, so there isn't a whole lot of character development, so I wouldn't really call this a character-driven movie. And what this movie ultimately decides to do, the path that it decides to tread, rather than add some sort of mystery, or some sort of intrigue, or some sort of doubt, or some sort of internal character conflict, or some sort of character flaw, or maybe have characters doubt and mistrust one another and stuff like that. All the things that the best suspenseful horror movies do. Add a bit of mystery, add a bit of intrigue, a bit of a whodunit, a bit of, a bit of doubt and a bit of conflict within a character. Instead, what this movie decides to do, this movie is essentially a checklist. It is a checklist of every single social commentary you could think of. Guys, I am not exaggerating. This isn't even a horror film. What this is it is a straight up propaganda piece. It is a straight up social commentary. Now, what this movie does, the first half hour of this movie, nothing happens. Now, I talk about pacing in movies. That's another thing very important in horror movies, particularly if a horror movie is going to be short. It needs to be paced in a way that there's things happening. You're always progressing the story. I am not shitting you. I am not exaggerating. The first 30 minutes of this movie, they might as well. And again, guys, please don't think I'm trying to be funny here. I'm not. This is not a funny video. Please don't think I'm trying to be hyperbole and trying to, lap it up a bit and make it seem worse than it is. I'm not. They might as well have just stood in front of the camera and said, white men are all evil and women and minorities are all great. They might as well have just said that in front of the camera. The movie could have been over in 5 seconds. I'm not even kidding. They might as well. I would have appreciated it more if they did that. They spent the first half hour of this movie lecturing the audience. Literally, you know how certain films break the fourth wall. This movie basically does that. It basically holds your hand and breaks the fourth wall to the point where the characters in the movie are telling you what a piece of shit you are. Telling you if you're a white man, you're a rapist. There's even a scene in this movie where one of the male characters says, "Not all white men are rapists, and then the other character turns around and says, "Yes, they are." Literally, this movie is trying to ram this idea down your throat that all white men are rapists, that all white men are evil, and that all white men are cultists who simply hate women. There's even scenes in this movie where they say we're taking on the patriarchy. They say that about 4 or 5 times in this movie throughout, they say we're taking on the patriarchy. This movie also does something, and I talk about a movie building mystery and intrigue and mistrust and stuff like that. It does something that so many horror films nowadays do. It tells you who the bad guy is at the very beginning. You know, it makes it very, very clear who the antagonists are in this movie. It's basically, look, let me just stop rambling and let me get to the point, right? Every single white man in this movie is the bad guy. Every one. I'm not exaggerating. Again, I'm having deja vu. It's like watching Charlie's Angels again. Every single white man in the movie is the villain. All right, everyone. Everyone is a rapist. Everyone is a murderer. And the ones that are not rapists and murderers, it's implied that they may be racist, rapists and murderers. There's one black guy in the movie who's like this token black man, and he's the hero of the movie that is there to save the day. The main character, I can't remember. I don't know any of the actors' names. I've never heard of a single one of these actors. But the main character in this movie, or who's supposed to be the main character, however, she's given really nothing to do the whole film. She just basically wanders around and mopes the whole film. She has been raped, apparently, or it's implied anyway, that she's been raped a couple of years ago on college campus. And the movie spends, about 30 minutes lecturing the audience about this idea of rape culture, which I've already debunked, by the way, in the past. It doesn't exist. There's no such thing as rape culture. But yeah, that's what the movie decides to linger on for a big bulk of its opening act, is this idea of rape culture. It also goes into this idea of the founding fathers and people who founded America as all being racists and destroying statues and petitioning to have them removed and stuff like that. Then midway through the movie, it drops a bomb, and it was at this point that people in the theater started walking out. I'm not even kidding. It turns out that there's I'm laughing just thinking about it. It turns out that because the SJW female petitioned to have this statue removed, it turns out that this statue on the inside of it had some black magic where I don't understand. It's hard to even put it into words. It's funny, man. The statue somehow possesses men on campus. It puts out this high-pitched screeching noise where all the men start having headaches and they all start flipping out and start raping the women and trying to kill them and shit. But there's something so funny. They say in the movie, there's a bit of dialogue in the movie where one of the villains, or I didn't see them as villains, but one of the villains says, this statue, because it possesses the men, it gives them superhuman strength and speed. But even though they supposedly have superhuman strength and speed, they get out-muscled and murdered by these women. Literally, these women who are college kids, sorority girls or whatever. The guys go into their sorority to kill them, armed with bows and arrows and knives and shit, and the women defeat them. Literally, the women in this movie are invincible. The only ones that die in the movie are side characters that you don't even remember their names. But the main women in the movie, the whole main cast, they can't be killed. They're invincible. They get do you know what's funny as well? There's not one drop of blood in this movie, and it's funny because I mentioned how PG-13 horror films, they just don't work. They don't work at all. Characters in this movie get stabbed. They get cut. There's even a scene where the main character gets cut. She gets slashed at each side of her face, and not one drop of blood comes out. I'm not even kidding. Have you ever seen somebody get their face slashed? I have. Have you ever seen somebody get stabbed? I have. All right. I'm telling you right now. Listen, let me not get too deep here, but I've been on the receiving end, and I'm telling you right now, there would be a shit ton of blood in a situation like that, right? There's not one drop of blood in this movie. A woman even gets butchered with an axe at one point, and there isn't one drop of blood. And she's lying on the floor, dying from being slashed up with an axe, and she's fine. There's no wounds or anything. Guys, this movie is so bad. I'm so pissed off because I'm going to have to redo that flipping list of the top 10 worst movies of the year. It's kind of a tradition with me. It's what I'm going to be doing each year on this channel. And I'm going to have to update it because of this piece of shit. Because this is the worst film I've ever seen. I thought that movies, you know, I'm not going to tell you guys, you know, all the movies that are on the list, but I thought I had a pretty solid list of the top 10 worst movies of the year. I don't think there's a single movie on that list that is worse than this. This movie is going to go down in history. I'm telling you right now, it is going to go down in history as one of the worst films ever made. Nobody's talking about this film, and thankfully, because it's that bad. I haven't seen one review for it. But I assume some reviewers are going to pick it up and are going to talk about it. But let's hope you see this first, because those reviewers are going to be scared to criticize the movie, because they're going to be like, if I criticize it, I'm going to be called a misogynist or whatever. I don't care. You can call me whatever you want. You can call me a misogynist. You can call me a racist. Listen, I have that shit every day of my life. It doesn't bother me. Okay, I'm stoic. You can't intimidate me and tell me how to think or feel. It doesn't work. All right, and it's funny because you think that in 2019, like, this SJW pandering and stuff like that would start to drill into people's heads and they would start to, you know, abide by it. But like I said, in this theater, people were walking out. People who looked, you know, they didn't look like they were like hardcore conservatives or anything like that. You know, they were just regular people, and they were like, I'm sick of this shit, and they were walking out. Okay, it doesn't matter. Look, you can't tell people how to think. You can't make a movie and just say, you're evil because you're a white man, and all white men are evil, and all white men are rapists, and expect people to like it. So this movie is going to bomb. Definitely isn't going to do well at the box office. Like I said, it just came out here today, so I don't know how well it's done. I'm imagining so, since there were so many walkouts, people just walking out of the theatre, I'm imagining this movie's going to lose money. But then again, shitty PG-13 horror films are very cheap to make, so I don't see this movie as having a very big budget anyway, so maybe they'll make their budget back, I don't know. But like, the action sequences that were there, so choppy and poorly edited and unrealistic, not one drop of blood, not one practical effect. This movie is the worst movie I've ever seen, and it saddens me that movies are getting worse. Like, how bad are films in 2020 gonna be? If films in 2019 were this bad, how many bad films are going to be out next year? It really, really doesn't fill me with confidence for the future of entertainment and movies. So that's pretty much all I've got to say about this movie. This movie gets a big fat 1 out of 10. If I were to give out zeros out of 10, this movie would get a 0. But I tend to just do 1 to 10. So this movie gets a 1 out of 10. Worst movie I've ever seen. I would rather watch The Festival than this. I would rather watch It Chapter 2 than this. I'm not even kidding. And you guys know how much I hated those movies. Worst movie I've ever seen. Let me know what you guys think anyway. Thanks for watching, and God bless each and every one of you. And please be grateful, because we have it easy. We really do. God bless each and every one of you. Thanks for watching.